Booker T. Washington is quoted as saying, "True success is not measured by what we achieve, but how we remain grounded in the face of it. Humility is the quiet strength that allows us to rise without losing sight of our roots." Let's talk about humility through success on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it relates to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have a returning guest to the podcast, Freed-Hardeman head men's basketball coach, Mr. Drew Stutts, with me on today's episode. Drew, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you having me back. I'm excited about today and get to chat a little bit.
Yep, had to have you back. Had your sister on last episode. She did a great job, and told her that you would be coming on this week. And the topic is something that we're going to be talking about, something that you have a little bit of experience with, which is good for the whole athletic department as well, humility through success. For those that maybe didn't listen to the last episode you were on in season 1 and not familiar with some of the things that you've done, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, as you mentioned, head coach of the men's basketball team here. If I can remember correctly, I think I just finished my 6th year as head coach.
That's right.
And, roundabout been coaching for about 15 years now. Excited about leading this program, continuing upon the success that we've had. Coached in a variety of levels, from the junior high level to the high school level to different assistant coaching roles, and now in a head coaching role. Been really fortunate to have some really good mentors along the way. At Morris Hill Bible School here at Freed-Hardeman. Had some really influential men and women in my life, and I think those men and women have contributed to just who I am today. And so excited to talk a little bit today, and I don't know how in depth you want me to go into background, but maybe that'll just
that's good.
Check the box there.
Yeah, that'll work. And I had to look up how long you've been here, because before you were head coach, you were an assistant coach under Jim Sanderson, and so it feels like you've been here a long time. But head coach, you just finished your 6th year. You were correct in that. And I had to look back at some of the records because I was curious. I'm like, all right, we're talking about success or humility through success. So I'm like, let's see how he's done the past 6 years as he's been here. And I went back, and 2019, 2020 was your first year. And first year head coach, sometimes that's a kind of you're adjusting and different things. Had a winning record, 18-10, 15-7. That was when we were in the American Midwest. The first year you were here. Still hadn't made that transition yet. 2020, which was right around, all this was around COVID too, so that was always interesting. 15-9, 9-7 record in Mid-South Conference play. And then 2021, 2022, 19-13, 13-9 in Mid-South Conference play. We went to the quarterfinal round of the Mid-South Conference tournament that year. And then 2022 is kind of where we made a little bit of a turning point, where we had the first of our Mid-South Conference championships, 25-9 record, 16-6 in conference play. Then the last couple years, we've just built on that and won 3 straight Mid-South Conference championships. The last couple seasons have had 30 wins or more, and 10 wins in conference in 2023 and 8 wins this past year. And obviously 2023, 2024 was the NAIA National Championship year. And then this past year, we went all the way to the finals. So all of that being said, we've had, of your 6 seasons, the last 3 specifically have been very successful. And it begs the question a lot of times, when you've had that much success year after year, 3 straight Mid-South Conference championships. We don't talk about this a lot, but Mid-South is one of the toughest conferences to play in, both men's and women's basketball. So you've had a lot of that success with a lot of tough competition. How do you keep your players motivated? How do you keep them hungry with that success and have that humility as well? So from your experience, how does success that you've had, or maybe just success in sports in general, affect an athlete's perspective on being humble, staying hungry?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's just individual. All of us obviously have different character and different experiences. You're dealing with a wide range of student athletes, some who might be in their first season as an 18 or 19-year-old. Others, we've had 5th-year seniors that are married. So you're really dealing with a wide range of individual guys that are just getting into college, fresh out of high school, or guys who are moving into more of adulthood and just have a lot more life experience and have kind of been through things. So it's an interesting journey leading a locker room full of a lot of individuals that are just in different places in life and come from a lot of different backgrounds. That's one of the things I love about our team is, we've got a lot of kids that come from all kinds of different backgrounds, single-parent homes, two-parent, traditional home, maybe really well-off family, maybe a family that struggled a little bit. And so it really makes for a unique culture and a unique experience. But to touch on, I guess, the humility and maybe what some of the maybe challenges that come with success. You mentioned Jim Sanderson earlier. Really good coach, was the head coach here at Freed-Hardeman, won the national championship when he was the head coach at Faulkner. Learned a lot from him through our relationship and coaching together. But one of the things that really stuck out to me that he said, this was early, and I really had never thought of this in this way, but he said success is the hardest thing to handle. And I think a lot of times we naturally think that failure is hard. And it is, to a certain degree. But having success is by far the hardest thing to handle because naturally as humans, we're wired to relax. We're wired to think that we are, that we're permanently going to be in the position that we're in at that moment. And, that's just not true. And so you're always throwing curveballs as a coach. And so when they're expecting a fastball, you're throwing a curve. When they're expecting a curve, you're throwing a fastball. And so what's kind of interesting is, a lot of times just as far as X's and O's and on the court, after a big win or after a lot of success, usually that's when we have our toughest practices.
Yeah.
Because everybody comes in naturally feeling like, hey, we've arrived. But I guess to get a little deeper into the question here, you want to stick with your systems and your processes that have gotten you to the point to have the success that you just had. You don't change your mindset. You don't change your day-to-day work. You don't change anything, other than just trying to find a way to get a little better,
Yeah.
And as a coach, that's challenging. As a 18 to 23, 24-year-old, that's extremely challenging. But success is really hard because, number one, you think you've arrived a lot of times. Then number two, I think the other hard part of the thing about success is maybe getting a little off topic with the humility here, but people begin to expect it. When you've won 25 or 30 games 2 or 3 years in a row, there comes a natural expectation. And people, let's just say we win 20 games next year and don't win the conference championship, even though that might be one of the best seasons in Freed-Hardeman history, people think, oh, that didn't live up to the expectation of the last 2 or 3 years. And that's wrong. That's a wrong mindset to have for myself as a coach, as a player, as a program. You want to control the things that you can control. And obviously this is coach talk a little bit, but you just want to make the most out of what's right in front of you. And if that equals a championship, then great. If it doesn't, then that's okay as well. So I may have gotten off topic.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about how you keep your athletes humble, and that's, like you mentioned, that's going to be unique to each person. Every individual athlete's going to have different things that might help them stay focused or whatever it is. For a coach or maybe your coaching staff, the tendency can be there too to say, well, we've had we've won a lot of these games. We're successful this year, whatever the case may be. How do you as coaches stay humble, motivated, trying to keep your team focused, but also keeping yourself focused as well? How do you do that?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I mean, and you're right. People have asked, like, are you bored? Are you getting a little bored at times? And I'm not, because the goal here is not to win games, but to maximize the ability of the team that you have and to move players and teams in the right directions on the court, but also in life. A combination of those two things. And, every season, every game, every day brings a new set of challenges. That's one of the things I love about athletics in general is it's always new. It's always new. And, obviously a big part of this is just your individual character, the things that you value in your life, and what's important to you as an individual. If winning is the most important thing to you, then naturally once you've had that success and you've checked that box, if that's the most important thing to you, then you're going to probably have some issues that come along with your consistent motivation, your consistent success, and staying dialed in on the day-to-day. But I enjoy the challenge of the success and not feeling like you have arrived, that you are there, that you've accomplished something special. Even though if that is the case in some situations, the challenge is, can I stay humble? Can I stay in the moment? Can I get a little better? Can we push the dial a little further? And to me, that's an ultimate challenge, and it's awesome, and something I thought we did a really good job with last season overall, coming off of a national championship run. Can they do it again? We lost, I think, 5 of our top 10 players from the previous year. This year, it's 7 out of our top 10 players from this season. And so, just staying present and staying in the moment and knowing what you value most. And that's getting the most out of your team and moving them in the right direction as a basketball team, but also as just individuals as well.
You mentioned Coach Sanderson and him being an influential person as in your coaching career, as far as being a good mentor to you in teaching you some of these things that we've talked about today. There's probably some other people in your life as well that have helped you as far as mentors or role models that have helped you to maybe stay humble throughout the success. The first thing that comes to my mind is the people that keep me, I guess, humble. If I've ever hadn't done anything that's done very well, my kids will always keep me humble because they don't really care. It's like if I did something well, they're like, I'm just dad. So, it could be family, could be some other people in your life that maybe help you focus on other things besides sports, on what's most important. But maybe tell me a little bit about some people in your life that have helped you to maybe stay grounded and humble throughout those times of success, but also maybe even failures.
Maybe not somebody that I regularly communicate with now, but somebody that I did learn from was Mike Mitchell. I know I brought him up in another podcast. I don't remember if we talked about him previously, but he was the head coach at Mars Hill Bible School, also was the head coach at Greater Atlanta Christian, and, had just unbelievable success. I think won 9 state championships, hundreds of wins. I don't even know what his overall record was, but I want to say like 700 or 800 wins over his career. He was an everyday guy. He was an everyday guy. If we were up by 30 points, if we were down by 5, whatever the situation was, really his demeanor and his approach toward the day-to-day work and the way that he addressed the team, he was always wanting to get the most out of every player. And that rubs some people the wrong way at times. Right. That's hard to understand because – human nature is, hey, coach, you're up by 20. Why are you calling a timeout and chewing this guy's butt right now? Well, because he was trying to get the most out of his team. He was trying to push that player to be the best player that they could be. And, there's a lot of life lessons that are learned in that as well. But, Mike Mitchell's a guy that I learned from and just was able to sit back and learn, just observe for 4 or 5 years. Obviously your family always keeps you humble, just day-to-day life, and that's one of the things I've talked about, and we may get into this, but, winning the national championship was unbelievable, but a month later, my life was no different.
Right.
My life was no different, There's a really good coach at the University of North Carolina. If I try to pronounce his name, I'll mess it up, but he's a women's soccer coach. I read this or watched it at some point, and this guy, instead of giving trophies and plaques and that sort of things at the end of the season, he gives there's a particular type of flower that he gives his players, and that's about how long you get to enjoy success, the life of that flower. Now, they've won like 10 national championships in a row, something unbelievable, but he gives a flower, and he uses that obviously as just a metaphor of like it's fleeting. Success is fleeting. It's here and it's gone, and it's more about the climb and the day-to-day than it is, checking a box or hanging a banner or putting a trophy in a trophy case. A trophy is going to collect dust. Yeah. But you get to enjoy that for a few weeks, and then it's like right back to life. Nothing changes here, and that was really unique and a cool analogy there as well. But, your family keeps you humble. Roman, Deacon, Parker. I've got 3 little ones, my wife, Amanda. So the way that basketball works is, that season ends around April. You got about a month there until the summer comes, and then it's, just back to normal being a dad and husband and day-to-day life and getting a to-do list done around the house. So.
There's always a to-do list, yep. I talked to your sister last episode about team captains, and I think this can also play a big role in how the team responds not only to the coaches but also as they interact with each other as far as staying humble. How much maybe the team captains that you've had, or maybe just some leaders in general on your team, how have they kept the team humble, maybe through times of success, and maybe that student leadership, peer leadership, whatever you want to call it? How has that impacted the humility of your teams just by having that example on the court?
Sure. I think there's years that captains are really important, and there's obviously a responsibility and role that comes with being a captain. But, at the beginning of the year, each year when we have our first team meeting, let's just say we have 17 guys on the team, one of the first things I talk about is I want 17 leaders. I want 17 leaders. We don't want 3 captains. We don't want 2 captains. We don't want 5 seniors. We want 17 leaders, because everyone is gifted with a different set of skills and experiences. Whatever it is that you have individually to bring to the team, that's what I want you bringing every day. There's not a hierarchy of head coach, assistant coach, captain, this. Like, people naturally think of it that way.
Right.
But really, in general, our goal is all the same. Whether I'm the head coach and you're the last guy on the bench, we are one team. We are one team, and we all are going to contribute to this season in whatever way that we can. So, in general, I'm not big. I know coaches are sometimes about like really singling captains out and demanding more of them than other people. I think that captain role for me probably looks a little bit different. I want everyone to be a leader. I want everyone to bring what they have to the team, and that may be being a guy that doesn't check into the game but has unbelievable enthusiasm on the bench. It may be a guy that doesn't check into the game but is an unbelievable teammate, shows up with great energy, effort, competitive spirit every day that we have practice. Different people have different talents, different strengths, and whatever those are, we want to highlight those.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I was thinking about as we were talking about success or having success and then trying to balance that with humility is whatever level you play at, whether it's NCAA, NAIA, most of these athletes that we come in contact with, they have had a lot of success just to get to the point where they are. Whatever level you're playing, you have to be probably one of the top players at your school. So a lot of times they come in maybe with a little bit of confidence, right? Because they've had all this success and they have been receiving scholarship offers or whatever it is. So a lot of times people call that, well, they've got a little bit of swagger, coming in. And rightfully so. Sometimes you need that to be able to have the success that they've had. But as a coach, you have these players coming in with confidence already. How do you balance that and say, hey, we got to be grounded too. We got to stay hungry. We got to be humble. How do you take all these different individual personalities and mold them to be, like you said, be a good teammate, but also stay humble as well?
Yeah. And I mean, belief and self-confidence is not the same as arrogance.
Yeah.
Those two things are not the same. It's interesting that you asked me this question, and I'll probably forget. I'm going to get off topic.
No, you're good.
You'll have to remind me again. But it's interesting. We just had team camp this past Saturday. We had 16 teams. It was a great event. But there was a kid here, probably the best player in camp. He didn't particularly fit what we're looking for next year in our particular class, but he's definitely a college player. And I pulled him aside at the end of camp and, complimented him on, his success. Come to find out he's a really good student. But on the floor, there was a sense of arrogance. And that was one of the things I encouraged him to, just evaluate and let him know, hey, confidence is a great thing, but arrogance is going to turn a lot of coaches off. And this guy in particular happens to be a little bit of an undersized player, and he probably feels like, hey, he's really got to be seen out there, and he's got to make a name for himself.
Right.
And, but for him, the right coaches are going to recognize his talent. But absolutely, to go back to your original question, as far as just guys coming in, whether it be a transfer, whether it be a high school student, most of the players that we are bringing in at this point are the best player on the team that they were at the year before, whether that be a transfer or whether that be a high school kid. But, it all starts with what you value as a program and being sure that they understand that from the get-go. I know we talked about that on the previous podcast, but even in that recruiting process, as we're getting to know each other, I'm getting to know them, they're getting to know the expectations of our program. One of the core foundational pieces of our program is unselfish. That's communicated early on. It's also communicated early on that, we're going to play 10 guys. guys. We have one particular player coming into this class who, he averaged 20-something points a game last year. That's probably not going to happen this year.
Yeah.
And it's not going to not happen because he can't, but he understands in order for our team to have the ultimate success, his role may be a little less than what it was at his previous school. And so getting people to understand and buy in and believe that sacrifice, unselfishness, and kind of the way that we describe unselfishness, and I think it's important as you have, character traits or roles or whatever it is, however you want to mold, create that culture that you're looking for in business, in a team, you got to really define it. And unselfishness for us is, are you intentionally making the people around you better?
Yeah.
Are you intentionally making the people around you better? Like, is it in the forefront of my mind to figure out how I can make the people that are on my team, as well as my coaches, how can I make them better? How can I help them? And what's amazing with that is when you do that, what I found is the guys that are the most unselfish, that care the least about statistics, shot attempts, time on the floor, those guys usually play the best basketball. Yeah. Those people usually perform at their highest level, whatever that level looks like. And the reason is the attention's off yourself. You're not so much worried about, am I making every shot? Am I making every play? Am I getting every minute that I deserve? But how do I help the people around me? How do I make Matt Barker the best point guard he can be? How can I help Coach Stutts? Like, man, can I tell that he's struggling a little bit today? Like, can he use somebody to come up and say, Coach, what's going on? How are you doing today? And you'll be surprised. I mean, there's a level of maturity with some of our guys where they really have a sense of, finding that role of like, hey, I'm going to be intentional about picking somebody up when I can tell that they're down. Or it may be humbling somebody whenever you can tell that there's some arrogance, and then maybe it's a younger player that's learning the ropes.
When we think about the world too, with humility, when you think about just say professional sports, we think about the mark that an athlete leaves. I think the world tells us, well, it's all about, who is the greatest, Michael Jordan, Kobe, whoever. It's all about what are the numbers they're putting up. So that the world and the perception the world gives us is, well, that's all that's important is how much stats you're putting up or whatever it is. What I'm hearing you say is, for you, as far as the mark that an athlete leaves, goes beyond that, especially at the NAIA level with trying to focus on some of these other things. But the next question was, do you think an athlete's legacy is shaped more by their achievements or by their humility and sportsmanship? And one of the words you used is sacrifice. And I think what I'm hearing you say is the legacy is shaped way more than just what numbers are putting up. It's how they interact with their teammates, how they make the team as a whole better. Is that correct?
Yeah. One of the things we talk about when we're laying the foundation of the program and talking to parents and players is like, I used to say the most important thing you're going to do when you come to Freed-Hardeman University is get a degree. Get your degree. That is the most important thing. What I found, though, probably more important than degree, just in life, just a general life rule here, is like the most important thing is who you are becoming. Who am I becoming because of my experience as a college student athlete at Freed-Hardeman University? When I leave here in 5 years, who am I? What are my values? What am I going to carry into my first job, a marriage, whatever the situation is? If it's a leader, we've got a couple of guys that are Bible majors on the team. Who am I leaving here as a youth minister in the next church that I'm in? And I know you said, and I agree with this, and I understand why you said this, but you use the word NAIA, like, especially at our level. But in reality, it's really in life. Whatever it is that we're chasing, whether it's athletics, whether it's a podcast, who am I becoming because of this chase? Is this a good pursuit? And is this making me and molding me into the person that I hope to become one day? Or am I really getting caught up in wins and losses and statistics and numbers? And, for student athletes today that have social media views and followers, and for guys at the NCAA level, how can I make $1?
Right.
How can I improve my social media status? How can I improve my NIL? And all that stuff's great. I don't think any of those things are bad things as long as they're kept in the right perspective, in the right box. But as soon as those things are the things that start leading your decision-making process, there's a good chance that that's not who you really want to ultimately become, because that money's going to run out, and that opportunity as a student athlete is going to run out. And you see the commercials on TV. 99.9% of us go on to become something other than a professional athlete, and that's at all levels. NAIA, Division I, it doesn't matter. 99+% of these student athletes, probably by the age of 25 years old, will not be majoring and being a professional in whatever it is sport that they're playing. So it's one of the things that really concerns me about athletics today, and the direction is, they're really capitalizing on NIL and all those things, and that's great. But it really concerns me that we're losing sight of what makes athletics so meaningful to begin with, and the vehicle and the opportunity to help mold people, because athletics in the past has been such a great tool used to help mold these student athletes into great leaders, into people that experience all these difficulties, and now it's changed.
It's beginning tougher and tougher every year. Yeah, for sure.
Changing.
Yeah, and that is one of the things about the NAIA, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned that earlier, is there is this intentional focus, maybe more so than NCAA, where we have the NAIA Champions of Character, where we're trying to reinforce some of these core values. Sometimes that's harder to get through these athletes' heads than we would like. Sometimes it's hard to focus on some of those things instead of just wins and losses, X's, O's, all of those things. And the other thing that comes into play a lot of times is these outside influences as well. You mentioned social media. I think that's a big one. A lot of times players place their value in, well, how many people are reacting to what I'm posting? How many people are reacting to this great game that I had? So there's a lot of these outside influences that are coming in as well that maybe can hurt the team culture, different things, because athletes tend to focus, well, I'm doing all these things individually. I'm doing great. And they're maybe not focusing as much on how can I contribute to the team. So how do you handle situations where others around you or just around your athletes maybe become a little bit of maybe boastful and like, hey, Freed-Hardeman men's basketball has won 3 straight Mid-South Conference championships, and you kind of have all these people patting you on the back. You did a great job, great players. How do you kind of keep those outside influences in check as well to say, these are all great things, people are liking what we're doing, but we still got to stick to what we're doing? How do you kind of keep the players focused from those outside influences as well?
Yeah, and I think, recognizing success is great. It's great to be recognized for the hard work and the effort and, the success and what you've accomplished as an individual or as a team. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same point, as you're talking about here, there comes a lot of challenges with, how do you handle that? Do you start feeling yourself a little bit and thinking that you're a little special, or that you should be treated a little bit differently, or whatever the case is. It's a real challenge. Again, I don't know that I've handled it as well as I could. I think having this success that we've had, if you want to say that I've had as an individual coach, for me, just being 37, 38 years old, I think is a kind of a jump start to a career where it really has given me an opportunity to learn through trial and error. I don't know that I've always gotten it right. There are things definitely that I could do better about being intentional day in and day out with our student athletes, where we try to stay focused on who they're becoming as people instead of really just getting sometimes too locked into the X's and O's and the basketball and the grind. But a lot of it, I think, is just seeing, like I just talked about, it's seeing them as individuals. It's seeing them as a young man, not a backup point guard, and really knowing that ultimately what I want for them when they leave here is to be ready for life, to be better because of their experience. And I think when you go into it with that framework every day, where, just like when you have kids, it's the same as having kids. Basically, I've got 18 or 20 extra kids here. You want to look at them every day, not as something that you're going to use, but something that you can mold and something that you can help become the best version of themselves. And so it's a major challenge, but it's something you just have to be intentional with. It's something that you have, and you have to address it. It's the elephant in the room. There's no reason not to talk about it, you know. And so a lot of times I'll say, almost sarcastically, I mean, congratulations, you've won 7 games in a row. And we've got 20 games left in the season. So you're barely even into the race. At the end of the year, we'll pat ourselves on the back. We'll cheer for ourselves for, a couple days. But, Riley McLaren, who I know that is a personal favorite of yours and someone that, we've loved having here after we won the national championship, and I think this may be on social media somewhere, but he asked the question after we won the national championship, have we arrived? Because he had heard me say so many times for 5 years in a row, you haven't arrived. 17 wins in a row, conference, you haven't arrived. But when he said that national championship, I said, for today, Riley,
for this year,
you have arrived. But it's a fun challenge and one that I'm working through and I'm learning because I definitely don't have it all figured out. That's for sure.
When we think about humility, sometimes people, maybe it's not a right perception here, but sometimes people think, well, teams that are humble, or you don't want to be viewed as a pushover. You don't want to be viewed as weak. So a lot of times when you think about teams that are humble or just individuals that are humble, you have to balance that with, you have to have that competitive edge, but you also have to have humility, sportsmanship, integrity, all those things. How do you balance getting your athletes to keep the mindset of being humble, being a good teammate without losing that competitive edge and to not be viewed as something that's just going to be pushed over by other teams as well? How do you kind of balance that?
Sure, that's a really good question. I think it's great to play with passion. I think it's great to show emotion if that's how you are naturally wired. We've had different players here that have been some of our best players, some who have had zero emotion, and some that are really passionate and show their emotion. Probably the first 2 guys I think about when I think about, this topic is a guy like Cortland Martin. You saw him for 5 years. I don't know if I ever saw Cortland Martin say a word to another player on the court or show hardly any emotion, Very stoic, very humble, very quiet guy. And that was just how he was naturally wired. A guy recently that's been one of our better players, Peyton Law, full of emotion.
Very emotional,
Full of emotion, but not arrogance, confidence, excitement, passion, competitiveness, but it was never in a demeaning way or never and people can, people perceive things the way that they choose to perceive them, but it was never about Peyton. It was about us and his teammates and firing his teammates up and bringing that, that edge, that fire, that passion to the game. And so, your original question here is just talking about how to have humility and it being viewed as a weakness or as a strength. One of the things I talk about with guys, and this just comes from experience as a player, those quiet guys that are successful, they're the scary ones. They're the guys that they have so much confidence in themselves that they don't have to let you know. They're just going to let their play show. So I want us, I want us to be excited. I want us to be fired up when we have success. I don't ever want to try to take away that passion, that excitement for the game, but it needs to be directed towards your team and the success that we are having, and not in a way where we're trying to demoralize our opponent, to put our opponent down, to show someone up, to bring the spotlight or the attention up on myself as an individual. And so, just like we've been talking about, it's one of the things you coach up and you talk about through experiences. Sometimes it may be in the classroom, sometimes it may be an example in practice, but we don't ever want our humble approach to be perceived as weakness. And I think for the most intelligent viewers, they understand that. Some people think, this toughness comes from sticking your chest out and yelling at another guy after you make a play and this and that. To me, that you're exposing yourself, just like the kid I mentioned earlier, like you're exposing yourself when you have to tell me that you're real good, and really, body language is really important and things like that. And so it's easy for me to say, hey, that guy's not nearly as confident as he's putting off to be.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think your character and who you're becoming and all that kind of ties into that. It's about us mentality. How do I make the people around me better?
Yeah.
How do we have team success? But I do think there are some times that people may look at a player that has a lot of passion and might perceive it as arrogance or, him thinking a lot of himself. And, I want you to have passion. I want you to have fun and enjoy the game.
Yeah, every player is going to be different in how they express their emotions as well. Like you said, Cortland Martin, very quiet. Peyton Law, very loud, but both I would say are very humble. And one of the things I looked up, being humble is not something that means you don't have confidence. And that's one of the things I saw a quote is like humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's not having confidence. It's thinking of yourself less. And you're talking about this team mentality. When you have humility, it's less about me and more about like, what am I doing as a whole? And so I think that's a good quote to think about. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So it's like this idea of it's not all about me. It's about everybody else that I'm interacting with as well.
Totally counterculture.
Yeah.
That's totally the opposite of what the world says. It should all be about you. It should all be about me and my success and look at me. And so it's really fun to see people that buy into that team aspect and that how do I make the people around me better. And that's we don't have enough time today to talk about this, but some of the people that have had the biggest impacts on our team success are the guys that people don't even know.
Yeah.
Maybe they were a 4 or 5 year player here that saw very limited minutes or no minutes on the court, but they had a huge impact in the locker room on the players that were on the court, the culture of our team. I hate to start naming people off, but I think of like a Jackson Bennett. I love Jackson. Jackson never played any meaningful minutes on the floor for us here. He had a huge impact on our team's success because it was all about the team. Yeah. He showed up with the same competitive spirit, the same work ethic every day in the weight room, every day, and that's hard to do. And, I could name off 5, 10 other guys that have had that same attitude. And for those guys that are on the court that are getting the success, that are getting the spotlight, when they see a guy like that show up every single day with that type of mentality, it kind of humbles them in some ways, So, there's been a lot of people that have come through that have had an impact on our culture and have had that, as we're talking about humility and being humble. People don't know who they are. They were never – it was never their face or their clip that got put on social media. But I guarantee you those guys in life right now, and I could name off 5 or 10 guys and where they're at in life right now, they are better people because they were here and because of their experience. And that is just as meaningful to me as Cortland Martin on his 5th professional contract or Brian Battle on his 6th professional contract. So again, all comes back to this thought of like, who are you becoming as a person and valuing the person more than the player.
Right. Coach, I really appreciate you coming in. It's been fun to watch your teams. I know that it's, we would try to have humility in different things, but it is fun to watch y'all win and have successful seasons. It's very enjoyable to watch and to see how your guys work together. I think one of the things that everybody notices is, regardless if you're at home or away, how do you respond to adversity? And a lot of that comes back to that team culture, togetherness, and how everybody is a good teammate. And teams are fun to watch. Anything else you can think of you'd like to add about humility through success that we didn't get to that you want to touch on before we're done today?
I guess the one person as we were thinking through, like who has kind of helped keep you humble, I would bring up my mom.
Yeah.
Oddly enough. Not because she's been in my ear telling me to stay humble or this or that, but again, if you know my mom and my dad, they're 2 very different people.
Your dad's very vocal.
My dad is,
and I don't really hear your mom talk a lot. So yeah.
My dad is very, he's just a people person. He's a minister. For those of you that don't know, you may not think that if you show up to the ball games from time to time. He's pretty tough on officials.
Right.
Yeah, my dad's a minister. My mom is obviously a minister's wife, so my dad's always on stage. He's seen. But growing up and thinking about my mom and my grandmother, being a behind-the-scenes type person where you work quietly, and it may be something as simple as taking care of the house or cooking meals or, I just think back through my childhood, and these are things that you you unconsciously, they have an effect on you as a person. Now that I'm getting older, I've got kids of my own.
Yeah.
You start thinking about this stuff. But she did and still does so many things that she will never receive any recognition for.
Right.
And it has for sure made a huge impact on my life and who I have become as a dad, as a coach, as a husband, as a Christian man. Her example, more so than her voice, has played a huge impact in my life. And so obviously I love my mom and all the things that she's done for me. But, to the people out there that maybe aren't a coach, that aren't on a podcast, that don't like sitting down and having long conversations, your example and what you do day in and day out, whether it be teaching a little kids Bible class or, there's hundreds of ways and things that you do, but you never know the impact that you're having on, obviously your kids, but anybody that's observing you and watching what you do day in and day out. And, for me, my mom has had a huge impact on me, but I know she has on, hundreds of other people as well, just her example, but maybe not so much her voice. So there's a lot of ways to lead. There's a lot of ways to have an impact. Humility definitely is in my mom, and now I hope that she's passed a little bit of that along to me as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Great words. Appreciate it, Coach. Good luck this summer as you're recruiting, finishing up that, and we look forward to this season and watching y'all's teams play.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Drew Stutts for being my guest this week. Be sure to listen to this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also catch the Playing with a Purpose podcast on the Freed-Hardeman Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join me for our next episode as I talk with Park University Athletic Director Miss Kristen Gillette on the topic of being a positive influencer. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.